And welcome, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. And
Amen.
it's so nice that to see some new faces on the Facebook or the YouTube that I know that there's some people who have, I've known for a long, long time. So I won't mention names, but it's really wonderful. Going all the way back to my years in Durban. So I'm going to go ahead and start to share the screen. Here we are. A little. So we're still on Yom Echad. One day, one day. Here we are. Excuse me. Yom Echad Ha'amur B'Maaseh Breshit. The one day that is referenced regarding creation, right? The story of creation. Hayom holech achar halayla. When it comes to that day, the day follows the night. In other words, it starts that evening and continues through to the next evening. Shne'emar, how do we know this? Vahi erev, because evening occurred, vahi voker, and then morning occurred, yom echad, one day. So that's how we know that the day start in the evening and end at the end of the following evening. And of course, this is relatively common knowledge. However, there are more details that are interesting that you may find that are different. Right, so here we go. Klomar, that is to say, klalhu, that is, it's a general principle, lechol hatolda, for all subsequent acts, v'chein lechol dinei haTorah, and and regarding all laws of the Torah, shehayom holech achar halayla, that the day time follows the night time. Levad, however, there are exceptions. Le'inyan achilat kodshim, when it comes to the consumption of sacred food, sacred donations. Kaimalan, we have the position, shahalayla holech achar hayom, that in fact the night follows the day. That is, nighttime follows daytime with regard to those laws, shelafanav, the day that preceded it, the yalfinan, that we learn out, midichtiv, from what is written in Parshat Tzav, it's Leviticus, Bayom Korbano Yeachel, okay, that on the day of its offering, it shall be consumed. Lo yaniach mimenu ad boker, he should not leave over any of it until morning. So obviously, we're talking about that when it comes to the consumption of these sacred donations on the altar, you have until the following night. Alma, consequently, Laila Shela Acharav, the night that follows it, Kare Yom Korbano Ad Haboker. So the day of its offering is until the morning. So night follows. Vesham nichtov im yirtzeh Hashem, and there we will write, God willing, tam hadavar, the reason for this particular law, this difference, right? V'chein li'inyan birkat Torah. This is really interesting. That also applies to making the blessing over the Torah, right? Asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Haylayla holech achar hayom. So the point about this is, do you have to say this bracha every single time you sit down to study the Torah? And the answer is no, you don't. That if you do, if you get up in the morning and you make the bracha, you have until the following morning for that bracha to inhere. You don't have to repeat it until the next morning, till you get up again the next morning, right? Halayla holech achar hayom shelefanav, the night follows after the day that precedes it. Mishum, why? Interesting reason. The anan agira de yamama anan, because we are in this case day laborers. that la'asok b'divrei Torah, to occupy ourselves in words of Torah, it's as if we are laboring, right? We are workers. We're doing our job, right? And we are day laborers. Yasfinan b'yamama, okay? So when we want to borrow from the day, letzorche havayot ha'olam umasa umatam. In other words, if we have to take away from the job we're doing, right? We're supposed to be laboring on the Torah during the day. And if we have to take away from our hours of working during the day when we're supposed to be working at the Torah, and it may be legitimate, in other words, to survive, to do the chores, to do the work of the world, right? To do our regular job. Umasa umatan, which refers to trade, right? Ufar'inan balayla, we pay back the work that we make up the work that we left off during the day at night. We pay it back at night. Kamosha katuv ba'eruvim. This is actually mentioned in the Talmud, in the tractate Eruvim, page Samach Hey, that's page 65A, the A side of the page. And check this out ahead, coming up to it, we're going to look ahead, but Parshat Emor, when we get to Parshat Emor, Be'inyan oto ve'et beno, that when it comes to the law of not being allowed to sacrifice an animal and its child, okay, on the same day, Yalfinan beyichud shehayom holech achar halayla. In that case, right, we say that in that particular case, even though it's being involved in sacrifices, and remember, we said that when it came to offerings and things, the night follows the day. But in that particular case, we say, in that case, the day follows the night. Shilafanav, that precedes it. Visham Nevar, so there's an exception in that particular grouping. Visham Nevar, and there we will explain Tam Hadavar, the reason for this particular issue, Ma de tzarich limud biyuchad sham, why it requires a special learning out there. We have to be given the reason. The Torah needs to give us a reason there why the day has to follow the night in that particular case. So, it's again, digging down more deeply, we realize that there are, even though we sort of learn these rules and we think they are, that they're universally applicable, they aren't necessarily. There are exceptions in these particular rules when it comes to the actual application of them. So this is part of getting more deep into the subject. So next verse, right? Vayomer Elohim, the Elohim, God said, Yehi, let there be rakia, a rakia, right? Betoch hamayim, in the midst of the waters, Vayhi mavdil bein mayim lamayim, and let it divide between water to water. Okay, so let's take a look here. Yehi rakia. Rav Amar, the Amora, he's a teacher mentioned, actually a very great teacher, first generation Amora. Amora refers to rabbis mentioned in the Gemara, in the Talmudic times, after the close of the Mishnah in the year 200. So this couple of centuries following that, the rabbis of that period are known as Amoraim. So he says, Yehi Rakia, in other words, this phrase, let there be a Rakia, he says what that means is Yechazek harakia. Let the rakia be strengthened. Yikaresh harakia, or Yikrash harakia. Let the rakia congeal. And we're talking here about that film, right, that defines the heavens. Yiglad or Yigaled harakia. Let the rakia solidify. Yimtach harakia. Let the rakia be stretched out. Let's take a look now. So now we have a Torah Temimah comment here. We'll take a look. Midayek. So he is when to midayek means to examine very carefully, right, and be very particular about the wording, about the phraseology, etc., and to derive issues from looking at it extremely carefully, like under the magnifying glass, right? So midayek klal ha'inyan. So he by looking at so carefully at the wording and everything this Sha'amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in the fact that the Holy One, blessed be He, right, in the words of the Torah, the Holy One, blessed be He, said here, B'yom Hasheni, on the second day, Yehi Rakia, let there be a Rakia. Demashma, that implies, Sheha Rakia, that is that the Rakia, Dahainu Shamayim, right, that Rakia are the heavens. And that would imply that the heavens, Nivra'u B'yom Sheni, were created on the second day. So he's looking at this wording here, and he's catching a problem, right? Uve emet, and actually, in actuality, halo devar yaduahu, we know fully well, shashamayim B'yom Rishon Nivra'u, that the heavens were already created on the first day. So how come what do we mean when we say, let there be a rakia? What do we mean by let there be? Because it already was on the first day. So how can you say on the second day, let there be a rakia, and just translating it literally like that? It doesn't make sense. It creates a contradiction. Chen darish, and for this reason, he interprets halashon yehi. He interprets the language, the connotation of the word yehi, let there be, chetihielo laharakia havaya, that this shamayim, this rakia, should have an existence. Generally, that's the way I would translate it, but it's not in the sense, some kind of, we'll have to translate not as existence, but some kind of feature, right? Vahainu, and that is to say, or that it should be able to have stability, right? Vahainu sheyitchazek or yikaresh vigaled. That is to say that either it should be strengthened, or it should, whatever we said, yikaresh, right? To congeal, right? And something, or to be strengthened, whatever those words were that we had up here, right? Solidify, congeal, solidify, etc. Which has to do with giving it, strength and permanence, etc., etc. Okay. Let me go on with this. Okay. V'tam hadavar, and the reason for this, the Rav Lashitato, it follows Rav's position about this. He has a particular understanding of these verses, the Yerushalmi, that are mentioned in the Talmud Yerushalmi, in this particular reference to here. So that's because this is where this comes from. If we look here, right, here we are. In other words, in the Tractate Brachot, chapter 1, halacha 1, in the Yerushalmi, these particular positions are mentioned. That's what he's referencing. Okay, and let's find the place. Uba Midrash Rabbah, and in the Midrash Rabbah, Yom Harishon, that on the first day, Hayu Hashamayim Lachim, that at that particular time, the heavens were moist, right? They weren't solidified. V'lachen hutzrechu, and for this reason, they required lehit chazek b'yom sheni. They were required to be strengthened, firmed up on the second day. Vayeh ha'inyan yehi rakia, and the statement, right, that it says in this particular verse, let there be a rakia, milashon hapasuk be'iyov. The word yehi here is similar to the language in the verse in Job, chapter 37, and I've got it down here, right? Tarkia imo. So there's that word tarkia, imo. So can you stretch out with him, l'shchakim, the heavens, chazakim, kirei mutzak, as strong as a cast mirror, as a metal mirror. V'yein od be'ot haba, and see further in the next note that he's going to make. And we are going to take a look at that note in a moment. But before we get there, we have to go back to his quote here. Okay? So we have Rav giving this opinion, the Rabbi Yehuda ben Pazi Amar, and Rabbi Yehuda, son of Pazi, said he has a different way of looking at it. Ya'aseh kemin matlit harakia, that he should stretch, he should make the rakia like a strip, like plating. He should use it like when you plate something with metal, right? Kamo, as it's stated, Shne'emar, in Parshat Pikudei, and this is a parsha in Exodus that deals with the construction of the tabernacle, Vayirka'u et pachei hazahav, that what they did was they beat out the strips of gold, and they made it as gold plating for the various objects. That's the Yerka'u, to beat out. And actually, when we did this verse originally, take a look. Here let's see if I can find it. Sorry, thought I had it up here. 1 second. It's down here. Here we go. Describes beaten plates into very fine, so that you can use it to basically overlay something. So that's how it is there. So let's take a look at this. Okay. Here it is. But so Gam Hu Midayek. So likewise, he too, that is Rav Yehuda ben Pazi, also examines carefully Kamosha Diyek Rav, just in the same way that Rav did. In other words, that there's a problem here. We know the heavens existed already on the first day. So what does the second day work with the Rakia? And his opinion is, Va'afhu Svirale, and he too is of the opinion, Shebayom Rishon Nivru Hashamayim, that the heavens were actually created on the first day, Uvasheni, and on the second day, Nitchazku, that they were strengthened, they were firmed up. Ella, however, the difference is, Shesover Shenitchazku al Yehei Matlit, but he says they were strengthened, right? They were solidified, however you want to understand that, right? By being made bands. Kamo kol hadvarim shem hamitchaskim al yedei tzipui. In other words, the heavens were strengthened by, it sounds to me like being covered with some sort of like plating, as he explains here, similar to all things that are firmed up, they're made more permanent, al yedei tzipui tas shel bazel, by means of, tzipui would be like a decoration almost, of a band, of a plate of iron, kamosha katuv, as it states in that verse in Pekudei, vayirkadu et pachei hazahav, that they beat out these strips of gold. Haresha harakia al yedei tasim, that is to say, that this rakia, that the heavens, by means of these tasim upachim, by means of these strips of this overlay, etc., were strengthened. V'chein kativ, and likewise it states in Parshat Korach, where in that context, these people who brought the incense and died, they brought them in fire pans, and we're told that they were to take those fire pans and beat them out and place them over the altar. It says, "Va'osu utam riku'ei pachim." They should make those fire pans into hammered out sheets, tzipui lamazbech, as a decoration, adornment for the altar, the chazek, in order to strengthen it, al yedei tzipui, by means of this covering up, placing it on it, decorating it. Hainu, that is to say, shatchum, that they spread them out, al gabei hamizbeach, over the altar. V'chein kan, and so here, yehi rakia let there be a rakia, shiaseh la tzipui, that they should make for it this additional layer, right? Decoration, I guess I could call it, but it's more than a decoration. It's this covering, right? This plating, kamotas shel tzipui, just as we use overlaying something with metal. Or the fize, and for this, and explaining in this way, your ter nachon, it would be better, ligros matlit lirkia, that it should have been said to make a strip for the rakia, velo matlit. In other words, the language is a little bit imprecise in the original that was being quoted, and it should have said matlit la rakia, velo matlit harakia, and not the matlit the heavens. Didn't make the heavens into a matlit. It made a matlit for the rakia. It made this plating for the rakia. It didn't make the rakia into plating. Bereshit Rabbah, and in fact, the language is like this in Bereshit Rabbah, in this midrash on Bereshit, Reish Parshat Dalad, at the beginning of chapter 4 of that particular work. So, I see what time it is. We can take a quick look at the very next statement here. Okay. I'll tell you. Yeah. All right. Okay. Yehi rakia, right? Let there be a rakia. Tanya. So there is a source, presumably not in the Mishnah, but it's nevertheless from the period of the Mishnah, meaning prior to the year 200. Anshei Mishmar, the men of the watch. And he's going to explain what that means in a little bit. So we'll save this for next time. Hayu mitanin, we'll just keep going. So we'll just leave it as the men of the watch. Hayu mitanin b'choyom. They would fast every day. He's also going to discuss that, whether they actually fasted every single day. He's going to clarify that. B'sheni, on Monday, Hayu mitanin al mafrishe yamim. They would fast in other words, seeking protection for people who went out to sea, people who traveled on the seas. Al Shem Sheneh Marbor, and that's because on that second day in the creation narrative, it said, Vayomer Elohim Yehi Rakia B'toch hamayim. Let there be a rakia in the midst of the seas, in the midst of the water. And again, this is taken from Talmud Yerushalmi. The tractate is Ta'anit, which is, of course, fasts, Perek Dalet, chapter 4, Halacha Gimel. So we will save this for next week and pick it up here with the explanation of what he is talking about and why they were doing this. And we'll discuss it further there. So I'm going to stop the share and see if anybody wants to make a comment for the record. Otherwise, I will then turn this off. Okay. Very good.